Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever found yourself staring down a massive, tangled mess of spaghetti architecture, or, felt that crushing weight of technical debt that happens when organizations just scale without a real plan, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to transform Microsoft's interlocking cloud frameworks into a highly practical blueprint for building a secure, scalable Azure environment. We're cutting right through the noise and breaking down exactly how all these pieces fit together into actionable insights. So let's kick things off with a pretty fundamental question. How do you build a cloud environment that actually lasts? We really want to get away from those chaotic, ad hoc cloud deployments, right? And transition into a structured, highly resilient architecture. It requires intentional design and a really solid understanding of the foundational principles, which is exactly what we're going to map out for you today. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the well-architected blueprint, look at deploying Azure landing zones, dive into cloud security design principles, move on to modern access and networks, and finally wrap up with achieving operational excellence. Let's get right into it. All right, Section 1, the well-architected blueprint. This is really the macro blueprint for your workload. Think of these 5 pillars: reliability, security, cost optimization, operational excellence, and performance efficiency as the absolute architectural theory that has to inform every single technical decision you make. And honestly, the real magic, it's in how they interlock. Think about it. If you optimize purely for cost but completely ignore reliability, man, that cheap architecture is going to cost you millions during a single outage. You've got to balance meeting your uptime and recovery targets through redundancy while protecting your data integrity from attacks and keeping a strict eye on the budget. Throw in some operational observability and the ability to horizontally scale for performance efficiency, and boom, you are building on solid rock. Moving right along to Section 2, deploying Azure landing zones. This is where we start pouring the concrete foundation. Now, Microsoft has heavily streamlined the deployment process here. The Azure Landing Zones Accelerator's PowerShell module, it provides an opinionated best practice implementation right out of the box, complete with built-in Azure DevOps or GitHub bootstrapping. It's kind of like buying a house where all the complex plumbing and electrical systems are already perfectly coded to local safety laws. So instead of a total DIY disaster that takes weeks of reinventing the wheel, you're bootstrapping proven architectures right from day one. And the best part is, you aren't locked into a single language for your infrastructure as code foundation. The accelerators fully support both the Terraform camp and Microsoft's native Bicep language. Actually, if you go with Bicep, you can utilize the classic framework or check out the newer accelerator built on Azure verified modules. This flexibility is great because it ensures that regardless of whatever tooling expertise your team already has, you're going to be able to deploy a robust landing zone effectively. Okay, Section 3. Cloud Security Design Principles. Time to start framing the locked doors and alarms. In the cloud, those traditional data center walls, they are entirely gone. The old days of relying on some clunky corporate VPN as your ultimate shield are completely obsolete. Zero Trust literally has to be the absolute core of your Azure architecture. It's a huge paradigm shift because identity is your new modern perimeter. You must demand strict, constant identity verification for absolutely every person and device trying to access your resources. You just have to assume breach at all times. So, to actually execute that strategy, you need the right tools. Think of Microsoft Defender for Cloud as your neighborhood beat cop, constantly patrolling for vulnerabilities, generating alerts, and ensuring baseline compliance across your subscriptions. Then you've got Microsoft Sentinel. This is your elite detective bureau, a robust, centrally managed SIEM and SOAR solution handling the massive influx of security events. And finally, Azure Attestation. Think of this as the Vault Guard, running integrity checks on the entire VM boot chain and trusted execution environments so you know for sure your compute environment hasn't been tampered with. Let's jump to Section 4, Modern Access and Networks. We're securing the perimeter now. Listen, when it comes to identities, broad standing access is absolutely your biggest enemy. By implementing Microsoft Entra Privileged Identity Management for least privileged access and deep reporting, you basically turn a static, vulnerable environment into a dynamic fortress. Users only gain the elevated permissions they need exactly when they need them. And the kicker? Those permissions expire the absolute second the job is done. But remember, identity is only one half of the zero trust equation. The network is the other half, and it really all comes down to containing the blast radius. You have to meticulously plan your inbound and outbound internet connectivity, strictly enforce internal network segmentation, define your network encryption between on-premises and Azure, and plan for deep traffic inspection via mirroring or tapping. If an attacker somehow breaches that identity layer, these advanced network rules make sure they're immediately trapped in a microsegmented box, totally unable to move laterally through your environment. And that brings us to Section 5, Achieving Operational Excellence. Simply put, keeping the lights on. Now, this isn't just a static checklist. It's a continuous flywheel of operational health. You need to embrace a DevOps culture to break down those organizational silos, establish rigid development standards, evolve operations by lighting everything up with observability, because let's face it, you can't fix what you can't see. Automate for efficiency to remove human error, and adopt safe deployment practices so your own updates don't accidentally bring down your systems. And treating your infrastructure as code? Well, that is really the only way to reliably enforce these operational standards at scale. Configuration drift is a lot like a house settling, you know? Over time, tiny, undetected shifts and manual tweaks will eventually crack your foundation. By using ISC to design a reliable workload supply chain and actively monitoring configuration drift via Azure policy, you guarantee that the secure environment you built on day 1 is the exact same environment you have running on day 100. Wow, okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the well-architected frameworks to landing zones, zero trust security, and operational excellence. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Take a hard, honest look at your own infrastructure today and ask yourself, is your cloud architecture actually built to survive the future? Does it utilize these exact blueprints to weather whatever scale, security threats, or operational demands come your way next? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this empowers you to go out and build stronger, much more resilient environments. Catch you next time.